Alright, welcome to the final section on World War I, Unit 8, United States Foreign Policy and American Imperialism. This is the last video for this unit, and it is on the Treaty of Versailles. We've got to wrap this war up and keep it moving. So, World War I is going to end. Surprise, surprise, we know the end of this story. The Allied forces, because of the United States entering the war, had the military advantage to get Germany to surrender. Germany's going to surrender to the Allies on November 11th, on the 11th hour and the 11th minute in 1918. They actually did stop fighting at 11:11. The French time, which is crazy because some people got really angry that they were waiting until 11:11 to stop fighting, but I digress. When we look at the end of the war, Germany surrendering, we are going to have one heck of an uphill battle after this. Vladimir Lenin is going to state that the war was driven by imperialistic greed of the countries involved, that the secret alliances aren't going to stop with World War I. We're going to have even more alliances form within the Allies that intend to divide land from the war. So it's just this compounding, this getting bigger of a problem of these alliances that caused World War I to begin with and continue to form after the war was already fought, as if we haven't learned our lesson. Wilson is going to state at the end of the war that there can be peace without victory. He says that peace can be based on ideas, not on vengeance. And I'm pretty sure that the Allied forces probably wanted to give him one swift punch in the forehead for that, because they fought in this war from 1914 to 1918. We fought in the war from 1917 to 1918. So this idea of peace without victory, not gonna fly. But Wilson's gonna try anyway. Wilson also is going to propose the 14 points to Congress and to the Allied powers that would support openness, encourage independence, and support freedom. Well, that all sounds good and dandy, but people have some fish to fry at the end of the war. Wilson's 14 points. Now, these 14 points, they all have some pretty basic ideas. Wilson wants to eliminate secret treaties between countries. That's his first point. Open diplomacy, open conversations. He also wants freedom of the seas. Let's not have unrestricted submarine warfare again. That was one of our sticking points. He also wants to remove economic barriers. Let's go ahead and open up that free trade. Let's make sure that everybody can equally trade with whoever they would like to. And he wants to adjust colonial claims. Remember, Wilson, not a big fan of imperialism. He says, let's grant independence. And when we look at points 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12, they all go with that idea, giving lands back to the people. And this is the idea of self-determination, the right of the people to choose their own government. Restore those territories that had been taken in this terrible war and give the people back the power. But with the last point, number 14, Wilson suggests an international organization where countries could come together and de-escalate conflicts. And this is the point that sticks. This is going to be the League of Nations. At the Paris Peace Conference, we're going to have a meeting of the Big Four. We've got President Wilson, David Lloyd George of Britain, Clemenceau from France, and Orlando from Italy. These four guys are going to come together to kind of discuss how we should reach peace. What this meeting does, though, is it really comes down to the meeting of the big three, which is the United States, Britain, and France. European leaders are only interested in retribution, which means they have one thing in mind: They want to have somebody delivered to them on a silver platter. Somebody's head has to roll. And then you're going to have Wilson and over on the side saying, I just want peace. We can have just peace. Which gets him to the point where most of those 14 points are going to be ignored. People are like, will you sit down and shut up? We need to come to a place where we feel better about losing millions of lives, having our cities destroyed, our infrastructure is just blown to bits, literally. The only point they're going to approve from the 14 points is the League of Nations. They're like, well, by golly, that's probably a good idea. At the end of this peace conference, Germany is going to be blamed for the war. They're going to be made to pay those war reparations because of that war guilt clause, and their military is going to be heavily reduced because we don't want them fighting again. We don't want them prepping for another war. Alsace-Lorraine is going to be returned to France. Germany is going to be disbanded into colonies that get given to the Allies. Germany and Russia are going to make a separate side peace treaty, which is why Russia isn't at the Paris Peace Conference. No provisions at the end of this war are made to end the secret alliances, though, or preserve the freedom of the seas, which is going to shoot us in the foot and push us right into World War II. Which, if you could see, the writing is on the wall. All right, so Treaty of Versailles. One of the powers, and we talked about this in the very beginning, one of the powers of the president is that he can negotiate treaties and he can sign them, but he can't do that until there's congressional approval. So, when we look at the Treaty of Versailles, Wilson is going to have to take this treaty back to the United States and get it approved. Wilson brings back the decisions that were made at the Paris Peace Conference to the U.S. Senate to get approval. Now, the Republican leader of the Senate was Henry Cabot Lodge, and he was a rival to Wilson and did not approve of the Treaty of Versailles. The opposition, which is led by Henry Cabot Lodge, is going to have some pretty valid arguments. Their argument is going to say the United States should not commit to the League of Nations because it literally is everything that Washington told us not to do. It will get us into future entangling alliances. And their sticking point was Article 10. Article 10 of the Treaty of Versailles said that the United States had to commit members to the League to fight in any disputes moving forward. And we didn't like that because that went directly against Washington's farewell address, entangling alliances all over the place. Lodge is also going to make changes to the treaty that would put us in a position to be excluded from the League of Nations. Now remember, League of Nations is the only thing that got kept from the 14 points. Well, Wilson's going to want to get involved in the League of Nations. That was his baby. That's his idea. So what we're going to eventually see is that the American people's opinion is the one that gets fought over, because Congress really needed the opinion of the people to be on their side if they want to keep their jobs. So when we look at the people's opinion on the League of Nations, we're going to see German Americans, they see the treaty as too harsh on Germany. They don't like the war guilt clause. Irish Americans are going to be pretty upset because the treaty did not grant Ireland independence from England. Italian Americans are going to feel that the treaty should have given Italy more land, which is exactly what the leader of Italy believed. Orlando left the Paris Peace Conference because Italy was not being awarded the land that they wanted. So Italian Americans, no surprise there. And then we'll have another group of Americans that are isolationists that will say that the League of Nations is going to permanently involve the United States in global conflicts. Global conflicts that we, quite frankly, had zero business getting involved in. what ends up happening is Wilson went on a campaign across the United States to get the American people to vote and say, we really do like this treaty. We'll approve even the League of Nations. But while he was out, it's suspected that he got the Spanish flu. And while we can neither confirm or deny, the reading of the medical records suggests that he not only had the Spanish flu, but suffered some pretty dire consequences and lasting effects from it. And Wilson will suffer from a stroke while campaigning for the Treaty of Versailles, which will get him bedridden. Why this is important is Wilson, when he has a stroke and he is in bed, cannot look at the changes that Lodge had made to the treaty. Because he couldn't see the changes and be there to advocate against them and really bring the treaty what it needed to be, Wilson encourages the Democrats to vote down the treaty. And ultimately, with that encouragement, the Senate is going to reject the Treaty of Versailles. The United States, with the rejection of the Treaty of Versailles, does not get involved in the League of Nations. So the world's newest superpower is basically benched from foreign policy and foreign conversations on the global stage for decades to come. Without the United States being involved in the League of Nations, it becomes ineffective. So the goal that we had, which is pictured here, of putting a muzzle on the dog of war with the League of Nations, it doesn't work. The United States could not carry out whatever unjust actions the Treaty of Versailles had outlawed. The only people that had men left to enforce what the treaty was encouraging was the United States. The European powers had lost their men. They didn't have the military power to back it up, and they knew it. They had to recover from the war. The lack of decision by the United States on how to participate would exclude us from foreign affairs and really hurt our world view, our presence on the world stage for decades to come. And we're going to talk about what that means for the United States the next time we come together, the next unit. Now, that is where we end. What I would like you to think about is, now that we've talked about the Spanish-American War, our imperialistic policies, our place in World War I, and our place on the world stage following World War I, think about what is the United States' place on the world stage after we've talked about all of these different factors that have changed our stance on foreign policy. And I'll leave you with that idea to contemplate. Don't forget about your homework, and any questions, please let me know.